But it shows like, there's rule of law in the US to a reasonable degree, not a perfect degree. I would argue, as we've seen with Assange, for example, that's kind of an area where it's not working out yet. But for the most part, we have rule of law, or at least there's very strong avenues to at least try to enforce rule of law. And if you're well capitalized and you're on just the right side of how the law is written and truth and all that, you have a pretty good shot. We saw that back in the 1990s crypto wars. Back then, crypto didn't mean cryptocurrency, it meant cryptography. So when they were challenging the right to be able to create open source cryptographic code and then just share it around the world, the US government challenged that. But by putting it in books and by, relying on constitutional law, they basically, David beat Goliath. And this was like a case of not that consequential, something like that, because that kind of set the foundation for the internet and e-commerce. But this was like a little watershed moment of, 10 years of holding back the ETF and just kind of proving that, no, your arguments are arbitrary and capricious. They're not based on reasonable things. And so the SEC lost. And there's other things they could lose in the future. The Treasury could lose in court. I think probably some of those challenges are ahead in the next decade.
It's interesting because I can't think of a single instance. It probably has happened, but it doesn't feel like a thing that happens in the UK where people or companies sue government bodies.
I just don't know.
Yeah. I just don't think of it. Maybe it has happened, but I don't know, we're just different. But even so, it has. I've just got this much higher conviction now because I just believe that Bitcoin is going to be something that's going to be part of people's portfolios, part of their mix. Still a few more jumps, like Vanguard. Is that expected, or are they pushing against the river?
They and a lot of their investors, but they don't have. I don't think they have a gold ETF either. I mean, I think they allow them on their platform, but they don't offer one, even though they offer an ETF for almost everything. So they kind of have. They're not really they don't really like hard money. They like stocks, bonds, and cash, basically. It's very kind of traditional thinking.
Right.
It's funny because they're named Vanguard. They disrupted an industry at their time. They put a spike through the kind of the policy of really high fees for managing equities and not really outperforming. They did all that, but then the problem is they kind of became the market. We see that a lot recently. For example, Apple was disruptive, and they have the whole kind of famous 1984 commercial. And now they're kind of like trying to maintain monopoly control over their app store and kind of say like, no, you can't do that kind of, say like Zap, Tipping, and Nostr in our ecosystem. So they're kind of like anti-innovation now in a way because they're the incumbents. And we see kind of Vanguard has done the same thing. They became the market. Passive indexing is like everywhere now, and they're one of the largest asset managers in the world. And they're just like, no, we don't want to change anything. And they literally allow triple leverage short NASDAQ ETFs. They allow like crazy decaying like volatility ETFs that you're really only supposed to hold for like days if you're trying to hedge something. All sorts of crazy things. But no, Bitcoin's the one thing that's too volatile and too dangerous for our clients.
Well, that's like in the UK at the moment. You have to now be accredited investor to buy Bitcoin. I had to complete all the questionnaire, which wasn't just what's your income and what value of assets you have. There's also a questionnaire about Bitcoin and crypto. They're asking you questions to see if you understood it. So we have that. We also have most of the banks won't let you buy it. All this is downstream from government regulation. It's not the banks are arbitrarily against Bitcoin. It's the surveillance tracking laws it's the surveillance they pushed onto the banks to do, so it's too much risk for the banks. But I can download 50 betting apps, open up accounts, and gamble away everything I have on sports. I mean, to me, it is just stupid. But yeah, this is where we are. I also feel though, Lyn, over the last year, we're winning the war against FUD as well. And a couple of things that really stood out in the last
the mining, right?
The mining. Well, did you see the New Scientist stuff?
I don't think I saw that one.
So the guy from New Scientist, did you follow this?
No.
The guy from New Scientist, they wrote an anti-Bitcoin. You can probably find it, an anti-Bitcoin article. And they got community noted.
Oh, I did see this actually, yeah.
But also, did you find out they researched the guy who did it? Predator did a whole a deep dive in him. This is a guy who held Bitcoin. He's tracked the wallet and the guy's received Bitcoin over time. He sold his Bitcoin and he thinks it might be like the saltiness index.
Yeah.
But also we had Senator Warren getting community noted about everything this week. We're starting to see more positive articles. I actually think the community notes have been a really positive thing.
Did you see what New Scientists did when they got community noted?
They reposted it.
They just deleted the tweet and reposted it with like slightly different wording rather than own up to the fact they're just lying.
They've reposted 3 times now.
Have they?
But I feel like the way media is working at the moment, the way Twitter's working, we are now getting to just disseminate accurate information about Bitcoin. And I feel like the bias to naturally dislike Bitcoin is starting to evaporate.
I agree. I think it's still going to take more time for the bigger thing. But basically, when truth's on your side, and these arguments happen, you chip away over time. So for example, for years and years and years, it was like Bitcoin mining is bad for the environment. It consumes as much energy as a small country. And just over time, as more people give these like detailed reports or really good interviews, or you get basically people talking about the nuance of what happens there, or you talk about, Bitcoin being an anchor tenant for bringing on new electricity in Africa or something, or Bitcoin for grid stabilization. There's only so much you can keep throwing at it until eventually you change minds little by little by little. It was a couple of years ago, I had a debate with Did Economist on, I forget what platform, I think it was The Economist.
I remember it.
Yeah, and they actually did a poll for like the audience before and after, like live. and it shifted in my favor. Not necessarily because I'm a good debater. Actually, I don't do that many debates. It's just because the subject matter just lends itself toward as long as you're not an incompetent debater, you can present why that person's like being disingenuous or just wrong. And so that was like one little example, but that's happened 1,000 times for different people and reading different things. And so it's just a long, multi-year kind of educational grind to get people to change a view, especially because there's always friction. Once you kind of establish a position, especially if you said the position publicly, people get locked into that position. And so it takes time. It takes chipping away until it kind of becomes untenable to hold a position that was clearly incorrect.
Well, I mean, people can't, it's becoming harder and harder for people to lie.
Yeah.
Or flat out misreport things.
Yeah.
I mean, did you read Ian Burrell's article? Because we were with him in Africa.
I did, yes.
Yeah.
It was a great article.
It was a very good article. I mean, he came out there as a skeptic.
Yeah, great guy, but he came out very skeptically.
But not just skeptic, also a little bit disinterested. Like, didn't
totally.
show. And I think what happened was he spent time with us. He spent time seeing the projects, and he realized like everything he thought about Bitcoin was probably wrong, and he saw the positive impact it was having.
There was one really special moment when we were in Malawi. So we'd been to visit the site, Eric Hersman's site there, and then that evening we were having dinner, and it was like in this big field, and there's basically no electricity in the vast majority of the area. We're in Nimilanje, and so you like looked out and it was just darkness everywhere, apart from the foothills where this tiny little village was the only thing lit up, and it's like only because of Bitcoin mining it's possible. It was like a really special trip.
Yeah.
You've met my son Connor, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah, he's moving out there on Sunday.
Really?
Well, to Kenya. He's going to work for Gridless.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's.
I'm really excited what Gridless is doing. I think that's important.
It is really important. What's really interesting being out there and seeing it. It for me it almost feels like halfway between a business and an NGO, in that it is a commercial business. They are looking to generate a profit and grow their business, but it's not like extreme capitalism. They know they're delivering a public good and they're fully conscious and aware of it. But actually going out there and seeing these sites, it is kind of like everything you're told becomes real. So you hear about it, but then we actually met the guy in the village. We met the chief of the village, and he said to us, "Oh, my wife cooks food, and we now keep it in the fridge, and she can sell it. And we can sell cold cans of Coke." You hear it. Yeah. You hear this, but they actually do it. By the way, did you hear the story about the football? Did you read Ian Burrell's?
I read the story. Yeah.
When he was saying, was it in that article? He was saying, this is the one that made me laugh most of all. So this woman said, all the men used to go and meet up and watch the football, and they don't know if they're cheating on them. Now they have to stay home and watch the football. But no, I mean, look, how can you argue against these kind of projects?
Exactly, yeah. And one of the advantages they have from doing that good work is they get a lot of people that want to go work with them, I guess. I don't know about them specifically, but in general, when you do that type of work, you can really energize people that want to come and help you and give you free advertising, basically talk about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so even though it might be harder to make a profit, I don't know, I haven't dig into their economics, obviously, but even if it's harder to make a profit doing that, there are other tailwinds that at least come and fill some of that gap just because it's such important work and everyone wants it to succeed. And it's really interesting seeing, because I've been writing, I wrote that Bitcoin energy article, like long form a while ago, and I update it every year or two, just because, new numbers come in and new case studies come in, and I kind of want to keep the article fresh. And it's interesting kind of as I go and update it, I see some of the things that were written about in the first kind of edition of it start to materialize. So in the beginning, I'm kind of quoting like Ross Stevens' shareholder letter from 2020, talking about river hydro in Africa powering Bitcoin. And then you fast forward 2 years and it's like gridless. I got to actually say, okay, well, it actually is going from conceptual to in practice, and not tiny, but starting to get at scale. And so it's kind of, so far all the updates to that article have been positive. Basically, it's going in the direction of how things were conceptualized by many people.
When did you last update it? Was it due now?
Probably a year ago.
Oh, a year ago.
Yeah.
So you need to do it again.
Probably again. This might be one of those 2 year gaps just because I've been so busy. I did an updated version for Broken Money. Okay. One of the chapters is basically that article, but I had to tailor it to the book. So that was kind of like this year's update is the book version.
I mean,